Hey, I'm Kelly. If you love cars as much as I do, you're in the right place. From drifting car days to uncovering the world's most iconic rides. Gear up and subscribe to Drive with Kelly for non-stop car fun. We can argue about when the golden era in MotoGP was until the cows come home. There is one era that everyone seems to hate, the 5 years of the 800cc bikes. When researching another video, I kept coming across quotes from journalists and riders saying how much they hated these machines, with Rossi at the time saying it was the biggest mistake in the last 15 years. Time normally adds a rose tint to our memories, but for these bikes, it clearly doesn't. So why was the change introduced, and why did the bikes become so ill-loved? The end of the 990 era. To understand why 800cc was introduced, we need to go back a few more years. In 2001, after a 53-year, the 500GP era ended with a certain Valentino Rossi winning his first world top-level title on the gorgeous NSR 500. 2002 would dawn a new brand, MotoGP, with 990cc four-strokes allowed to race in the class. While not the screamers of the past, these bikes were fantastic to watch, as their torque engines allowed the riders to slide and drift the bikes on the throttle. Who can forget the much-missed Hayden drifting all the way around the last corner at Valencia, or Marco Melandri doing the same one-handed at Phillip Island in 2006? However, the decision to end the 990 class seems to have been a response to the tragic death of Daijiro Kato after a terrible crash in the 2003 Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka. What is odd about this being the supposed catalyst for the decision is that the crash was caused when Kato lost control of the bike under braking for the chicane, with a rear shake throwing him off. The bike hit the barrier, but with Kato spinning through the air and landing on the track, he died 2 weeks later. The official inquiry into his death indicated that if anything was to blame for Kato's death, it was the lack of consistent barrier protection and limited runoff area. Also, the race was never red-flagged, with Kato clumsily being lifted onto a stretcher under yellows, which may have added to his injuries. So, despite some other compelling reasons for his death, the FIM decided that the bikes were too quick after only 12 months of development, so the capacity should be reduced to 800cc for the 2007 season. The 800cc debut. Now, we all know that in the development of these machines, the progress seems to increase exponentially each year. In the first preseason test, the new slower bikes were already setting new lap records. With less torque and higher revving engines, the key difference with the 800s was that the riders had to change their approach to riding them so that they could carry more corner speed. Honda was expected to continue its domination, but it didn't quite work out like that due to the genius of new Ducati rider Casey Stoner. The GP7 had the most powerful engine, but it wasn't the best handling, which would become a standard phrase for the Ducati over the next 15 years. But that being said, Casey could persuade that bike to do things that his more experienced teammate Loris Capirossi couldn't do, and he went on to win 10 of the 18 races at the end of the season. The engines were already revving up to 19,000 revolutions per minute, and Honda wanted a rev limit to be introduced, but the other teams rejected the idea, unsurprisingly, as they had the advantage. These screamers were still very difficult to ride, and harked back to the 500 glory days with their angry power delivery. However, those 500s didn't have much in the way of electronics, whereas these 800 bikes did. The electronics revolution. This was the start of the real problem with the 800s. Teams went into overdrive, concentrating on developing their engine management systems, with the data engineer now being the most important team member. These boffins completely changed the nature of the bikes, as the power delivery could be massaged to suit the rider. Onboard GPS was developed so the bike would know where it was on the track, and calculate the correct amount of torque that could be applied to the tire at any given lean angle at any given corner. I've been told that the electronics were so sophisticated that during one race, Colin Edwards changed to slicks on a bike that was set up for wets, and within 15 laps, the electronics learned that due to the increased speeds, it must be dry and changed its settings. Might be folklore, but you never know. So every rider could have the electronics tuned to accelerate perfectly out of every corner, which robbed us of those glorious tire-burning slides and made overtaking even more difficult. Riders could no longer do what they did in the 90s, brake deep, make a pass, and exit on a torrent of torque. This was because as soon as the 800 dropped out of its power band, it was going nowhere and was easily repassed. So that type of overtaking became very rare. It's why the 800 era was 2.5 years old before anyone managed to win a race with a last lap pass. That was Valentino Rossi's unforgettable final corner attack on Jorge Lorenzo at Catalunya in June 2009. The Tire Wars. The era was further hampered by there being 3 tire manufacturers in the first couple of years: Bridgestone, Michelin, and Dunlop. I say hampered as some teams had certain advantages over others at different tracks, leading to the contenders being out of position. In 2008, we had the rather strange situation where riders were picking the tire brand, not the teams, with Rossi choosing Bridgestone and Lorenzo Michelin's. It was the same in Honda, with Danny and Nicky on different choices as well. I felt it was just confusing for the fans to follow and watch. However, one highlight was in 2008 with the epic battle between Rossi and Stoner at Laguna Seca. It was a thriller from lap 1, with a race remembered for a stunning overtake Rossi pulled off on lap 4. The Italian overtook Stoner just before the corkscrew, ran slightly wide over the rumble strip and off track, but he managed to control his Yamaha and hold on to the lead. This daring pass shook up Stoner, and shortly after, he made a mistake running wide, which was the end of the battle. Stoner even made another mistake and dropped his bike in the sand, but he still came in second. Fortunately, in 2009, Bridgestone became the sole supplier to reduce costs and corner speeds. However, bikes were still horribly expensive to develop due to the need for pneumatic valves and the crazy electronics. The financial crisis hits. The financial crisis also hit, and Kawasaki decided not to play anymore, announcing unexpectedly in January 2009 that it was leaving MotoGP. It did compromise with Dorna and raced a single Hayate bike with Marco Melandri, but they were never seen again after that season. 2009 was a duel between Rossi and Lorenzo, with Pedrosa and Casey occasionally interfering. Casey might have won that year if it hadn't been for his mystery illness, which was apparently an inflammation of the stomach caused by an intolerance to lactose, resulting in him missing 3 rounds. Despite the dislike for the bikes, this was probably the year that cemented Rossi's status as the GOAT, as everyone remembers his frankly unbelievable pass on Lorenzo at Catalunya. At the time, no one would have believed you if you told them that 2009 would be his last title. Rossi's verdict. Even though he was winning, Rossi was not a fan of the 800s. In September 2009, he was asked what he thought of the 800cc class. The 990 motorcycle was rough and wild, but with a great motor and a lot of power. The 800 is worse, simply worse. It is the same motorcycle with less power. I was very sad at the beginning, but now it has improved, but the power from the 990 made it a lot more fun. Rossi was then asked how the show can be improved for fans watching trackside and on TV. For me, the spectacle with the 990 was the same as the 500. There were big battles and large slides, and this is what the public wants. No, I believe the 800 is the biggest mistake the World Championship has made in the last 15 years. We have lost a great part of the spectacle, and part of this is because electronics have advanced too much. The manufacturers committed a great error when they changed to 800cc. The 990Zs were better in every way. The return to 1000cc announced. It seems that the powers in charge were listening to the riders for a change. In December 2009, the Grand Prix Commission announced that the MotoGP class would switch to 1000cc. Everyone cheered. However, this meant that we had 2 more seasons to get through. The 2010 season was not a classic, with Lorenzo easily winning from Dani Pedrosa. Rossi missed 4 races after breaking his leg in the Italian GP, yet he still finished 3rd in the championship. In 2011, Casey moved to Honda, and Rossi attempted to make the Italian Dream Team, replacing Stoner at Ducati. Casey had a near-perfect year, failing to be on the podium in 1 race only and winning the title at the Australian GP, whereas Rossi only made it onto the podium once. The safety paradox. So during the 5 years of the 800cc era, MotoGP electronics advanced from basic to rocket science, yet none of this technology made the bikes any safer, which was the original goal. In fact, there were more highsides and broken bones during the last 2 seasons of the 800s than since the early 1990s, before the advent of the rider-friendly Big Bang 500s. This rash of accidents was beyond the control of the electronics, as they were corner entry highsides caused by too cool tires, something which the electronics could not prevent. In the end, rather than making racing safer, the 800C were more dangerous than the 990C they replaced. The additional downside of creating boring racing and being hideously expensive meant everyone gladly said goodbye to the 800s, the end of 2011, with the 1000cc era beckoning. Now, tell me what you think on the most hated bikes in MotoGP history in the comments. And if this reveal impressed you, get a sneak peek at the 9 proven secrets which will help you last your motorcycles forever popped up on the upper left of your screen.